This is Wendy Halley, and you're listening to Lucid Cafe. Aloha, amigos. That's me being trilingual. Before we dive into today's episode, I want to say thank you to Barbara for becoming a sponsor of Lucid Cafe with her super generous donation to the podcast. Your donations really do help. You have no idea. If you're enjoying the show, please consider making a one-time or monthly donation using the link in the show notes or on the podcast page of my website. You can also support Lucid Cafe by subscribing to make sure you never miss an episode, giving it a positive review, or letting others know about the show. However you support the show, it really does mean a lot, so thank you. And know that asking for donations is not awkward at all. Now for today's episode, my guest Heidi Schmidt is a plant medicine fairy. My description, not hers. Stepping into her world is an instant reminder of the magic of nature. Now, Heidi refers to herself as an herbal librarian. Between her extensive studies and decades of experience working with plant medicines, she's a veritable fountain of knowledge. Some years ago, Heidi moved her seaside herbal shop called Vineyard Sound Herbs from her home on Martha's Vineyard to her new home in the Green Mountains of Vermont, where she created an apothecary she calls the Tiny Tea House. It's adorable. Please enjoy being transported into Heidi Schmidt's magical world. Thank you so much for coming on the show, Heidi.
Thanks for having me, Wendy. I always love seeing you and being in your lovely office space.
Well, thanks.
It's very healing.
Oh,
In the middle of the bustle of downtown, you wouldn't know it.
Well, it is quite the bustling downtown, isn't it? Not really.
Well,
it has its moments.
For us who live in the hills.
Yeah, way out there. So it's all about herbs. How did you become an herbalist? Is that what you officially call yourself, as an herbalist?
I call myself an herbalist, but I think of myself more as an herbal librarian.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I love that.
Just because there's so much to know, and I come from a agricultural land resource, plant ecology degree in the sciences, and was in research reclaiming mining soils, and I was trained for that in Montana. And then Reagan administration had Secretary James Watt of Secretary of the Interior, who shut a lot of us land grant degrees down because they were trying to privatize everything and basically saying there's no such thing as scarcity. And so a lot of our jobs were cut. So I ended up moving back east, working at the Land Institute in Salina, Kansas. Wes Jackson, who started the whole study of perennial agriculture, so you have less soil loss, sustainable agriculture. So I was always into plants and the land and saving it, and was involved in the co-op, and always had herbal tea blends to share with my friends. And that's where I worked, in the Bozeman Co-op, filling the Montana tea and spice jars. I got into that whole filling the jars and then knowing all the different teas. And then after college, my sister was pregnant with her first child, Parker, and I came back and got a job at Addison Gardens.
Came back where?
Came back to Vermont,
Okay.
Back east, and got a job in Vergennes at a place called Addison Gardens. And they were an organic perennial nursery in the early 80s. And I had studied these plants in the prairie, like echinacea comes from the prairie. It's a Native American plant. And so as Paul was teaching me how to propagate, Paul Sokol, who owned Addison Gardens, I was telling him where these plants were coming from and teaching him like the Latin and all that. So there was another woman there that worked for them, Julie Mitchell, who has EOS Botanicals and also works with the Montpelier Herb School here. And she was going to these herb conferences, and I remember her giving Louise Sokol this modern herbal volumes that's published by Dover. You know, it's like from the early 1900s, a nurse who gathered all this clinical information and botanical uses and of these plants. It's one of the, you have to have that in your library. Unbelievable. Just open up to roses and just read. It's amazing. So I kept my ear open. I had a friend who was older than me who was a nurse, and she started taking this herbal school, and I was wondering where to go in my life. And she said, "This is what you've been looking for." So I took this class in Western Mass through the Center of the Light. It was a herbal apprenticeship for 2 years. You go a month for a weekend and study, and then you take home homework, similar to what people know here in Vermont as Rosemary Gladstar's school. I hadn't heard of Rosemary yet. Maybe at that time, I don't know if she was in Vermont yet, but because she was in California is where she was from originally. So that just changed my life because I love to share and be an interpreter of nature for people rather than being in research where I'm just studying how grazing affects this one grass and have to publish that forever and to get a professorship on that one thing.
Right.
And that is important stuff, but it's just not me. I'm a people person. I like to share and make it accessible for people. So studying the herbs was a way of studying the earth and then sharing with people how precious our earth and what it offers us, like all the joys and wonders. And that just excited me. So I was trying to look for German chamomile, trying to look for English thyme, all the proper medicinal healing plants. And at that time, you know, in 1984, 85, it was hard to find that. There were certain places in Ohio, and there are certain places I found these mail order catalogs. And I just started collecting and starting my own plant nursery because I learned from Paul and Louise at Addison Gardens in Virgins how to propagate. So I said, look, there's no nursery on the island doing this. And so
On the island.
on Martha's Vineyard Island, where I ended up going back and taking care of my grandfather and then caretaking the house after he died. And it was an old farm. So I was working for Massachusetts Audubon then, a place called Felix Neck, and just doing this on the side. And then one day I went to the farmer's market and there was no one selling the potted herbs. They sold cut herbs with their other salad greens. So I carried a big array of different rosemaries, different thymes, and they were all field grown. So I would repot them, and I was known at the farmers market for all my potted herbs, from little ones to big ones. And I used organic potting soil I learned in Western Mass studying. It was called Moody Hills Farm. They were over the border in New York. And that was Carl from Vermont Compost. So I brought Moody Hills soil to the vineyard, and then Massachusetts NOFA picked it up, and then
And NOFA
is the National Organic Farmers Association, so there's a chapter in each state. And then all these farmers, I used to bring it for them, and then NOFA had the pickups, Mass NOFA, and a lot of the farmers are buying slings of Vermont compost still. So there was this evolution I went through. People call it localvore now, but when I was in college and stuff, we called it bioregionalism. So you're trying to work with your region.
Right.
and working with the plants. I'm trained in Northern European and Native American plants. I work some with Chinese herbs, but try to work with what's outside the door. Try to make it accessible, inexpensive. So we had everything bulk in the store, so you didn't have to buy it in a pill for $50. We would blend it when Essiac came out, when a company like registered her name into Essiac, and that was real expensive. All Herbalist, it's a Native American cancer treatment, supposedly with turkey rhubarb root, and I can't think of all the things, slippery elm, burdock,
It was
sheep
a
sorrel.
nurse in
A
Canada,
nurse in
right?
Canada,
She
yeah.
she developed this
She developed
formula.
and learned from I believe, a Native American.
That's the story, I think. And
Yeah,
she created
it's,
this, and it was supposed to be a tonic for people who had a cancer diagnosis,
yeah.
right?
And it really helps cleanse the bowel. It helps cleanse the blood, getting the toxins out. And at that time, just like the fire cider recipes being passed around, the Essiac recipe was being passed around. So we had the recipe, we made it for people and sold it for like $2 an ounce, which could make you a big batch. And so our whole goal was to offer what the way I was taught herbal medicine, it's the people's medicine, and it's our right to share with our neighbors and community this medicine. And the reason I call myself an herbal librarian, because it's illegal for me to practice as a practitioner of health in herbal medicine. I'd have to have another degree in this country. So we had tons of books. We had a lending library. We had a lot of books for sale. We had all ailments. We collect information on hard files, file cabinets. And so when someone asked something, like a librarian, we'd pull out the book because we knew herbalists we could count on. So I had, you know, particular herbalists, and that I love David Hoffman's book. It's a classic with classic recipes, and we would blend to order and adjust it to the individual because we had everything bulk. And that's how our teas began to be developed. I started with Jean's Greens teas. I think she was out of New York and she was an herbalist. And then we developed our own teas as time went
And
on.
who's we?
I say we, I'm meaning the plants, I'm meaning my community, I'm meaning all the people that came and apprenticed and worked
With you?
with me in the
Okay.
store and in the gardens.
All right. So you had a store
I had a store,
in
uh,
Martha's Vineyard.
yes, in
Okay.
Vineyard Haven. And then 8 miles away was my family's land where the farm was, and in the town that the farmers market was in. And because of the zoning, I couldn't have a farm stand or a little store where my family's place was. There's very strict zoning there, even though it looks like a farm. I wasn't allowed to have a farm stand.
Okay.
Yeah,
It sounds like it was a perfect fit for you that you probably never even would you have guessed that you would have become
it
an
was.
herbal librarian?
It was. This all just came like the muses came. It wasn't planned. It just happened. And I wake up at night and write notes. And I come from research. I mean, that's what I did through college when I worked in the summers in college, collecting information, collecting and filing and studying and developed this. It was almost like a thesis, my store was. I mean, and it was in the heart of community down by the ferry boat. People would meet there. It was I learned so much from my clients. It was you just couldn't help but learn because they'd ask, and that's again why I say I will find out. I will call when at Herb Farm they had a consultant that the man that started Herb Farm, Ed. I'd call and he would counsel me on like when the kids, because we were in a sailing town, a boat building town, a lot of kids grew up with their parents delivering boats down to South America or wherever, and they'd come back with kava kava or mate before these were available in the health food stores. So they'd heard about kava kava. And when the kids would come in and sit on our couch after school, because we had tea on the house, and this one kid, I saw them circling around by the counter, and they finally got the nerve up, hands in pocket. Do you have any kava? Like it was like
Like a
something
drug.
illegal.
Yeah.
And I said, yeah.
Illicit
And so all of
herbs.
a sudden I was getting these younger high school kids buying kava kava, like 50 cents worth or whatever. And I started getting worried. Am I going to get in trouble from the school? And I called Herb Farm. Ed said he started laughing. It's probably the best thing for them. They can't drink too much of the tea. I mean, they're buying so little that
What did
it's,
they think it was going to do?
well, it relaxes you. It's a muscle relaxant. It's a muscle
So they
relaxant.
were
And
just
it's,
chilling out drinking
yeah,
this.
they're
Okay.
chilling out.
All right.
It was fun. It's good for their nervous
That's
system.
adorable. You ended up moving to Vermont after a period of time on the island, and you have a store here. Or what would you call it?
I
An
call it a
apothecary? Or
studio
you have a
that people
studio
come by
here.
appointment,
Okay.
and I have a mail order business and wholesale business. Yeah, the internet is what killed the retail business. I ended up going back to school for phytotherapy, which is plant medicine, PHYTO,
Okay.
not Fido. Phytotherapy in England, where it was clinically based and wore the white coat and we observed patients, and there was a medicine room where we learned to blend, and because I felt I needed, people were asking me more and more serious questions. So I went to do that, which was very helpful because things were changing with the internet and retail. So I thought I would be more of a therapist. And I remember giving a talk at my store for the women that were leasing it, Michelle and her sister, who had Purple Girl Herbals, and they leased my business while I was in school. And I went to give a talk, and because I was studying all the science and the chemical constituents and the pharmacology and a lot of medicine, my natural flow, I always was easy to give a talk. You just start talking to me about nettles, I'll go on and on. But I was stuck because I'd been in this very scientific box and wearing the white coat. And I was like, whoa, I've lost that natural flow with the plant medicines
Huh.
that helped start the store because that's
You were
where I
too in your
came
head,
from.
or
Yeah. So I learned over time after seeing clients after that and charging them for like consultations, it wasn't natural for me. And some came back, but it wasn't, I'd already set up a free clinic situation in my store and the way I work with people that I now, I finally got back to what I normally do. It's about what I do in my apothecary, in my botanical apothecary, in my blending, in my listening to the plants for the person. So, because when someone walks by or what would walk in my store, I could see calendula flower around them. I don't
so
ask
your
me why.
intuition
Yeah,
really plays a big role.
yeah.
Okay.
You may commit me after this, but this is
You're
just
talking to me.
how I've
So,
always worked, and a lot of my basis comes from Findhorn and listening to those spirit guides, listening.
so tell me about Findhorn.
Findhorn,
What is it,
that's a
first
whole
of all?
nother radio show. But it's a
Which is
place in Scotland on the North Sea that Peter Caddy and Eileen Caddy and is it Dorothy McLean? They were very spiritual people who that's a whole long history in
what
itself, but basically you meditate with the plants or the situation at hand, and you listen to what you are guided by this world, we're connected. We are not the only beings, and there are different levels of
So it sounds very shamanic.
very shamanic.
Okay.
And they term plant divas, angels, whatever term.
So you got a kind of a full spectrum training from wearing the white lab coat to talking to the spirits of plants
And studying the
and the earth itself.
scientific
And yeah.
soil science. But my natural instinct, I grew up in nature. My parents always had it outside, and they would say the fairies are in the moss and that's how I played in the forest. I didn't learn what moss it was, until later. Or
Just that's where the fairies were hanging out.
yeah. So as time has gone on, I've learned that I like people coming over for a cup of tea. They choose a tea of their choice, and we'll have a consultation. And then I ask them, would you like me to formulate a protocol for you? And that is then when they say yes or no, then I'll make that blend. Will it be something for their bath? Will it be something to look at? It doesn't always have to be something you take internally to make you feel better. So I'm working with the individual by individual. And then it's the first time they buy the formulations from me is one cost. And then after that, it's 20% off to encourage, because herbs need consistent use for them to work. Some of them may take 6 months, a year. Sometimes it's only a week, depending on the situation. But you got to keep consistent. And once your body knows an herb and you go off it for a while, your body responds to that herb again. Unlike an opioid or certain medications, as you need them, like cortisone, you need more and more and more and more. And herbs work very differently. All of a sudden, you realize you're not reaching for that cup of tea. You're feeling good. Oh, that feeling's coming back. You start that tea. Now the herbs and you have a relationship and
Yeah.
dance together, and they come right in. So to me, it's common sense. And I feel we've lost a trust in nature. I feel there's a lot of fear about nature, and so you have a lot of articles out there. And granted, there are contraindications with herbs and medicines. And I tell people you can get certain books that tell you about these, and we don't know all the contraindications, but if you're taking an antibiotic, there's a simple rule of thumb. I always say if you're taking an antibiotic, a pharmaceutical antibiotic,
Right.
don't take a strong antibiotic that's nature based. That's like golden seal, which you need to be careful anyway because it's endangered and hard to grow. But you want to, if you're taking an antibiotic and you want to take a tea or something to support you, then you would take a very nutritive type herbal tea like nettles, or
So
considering
you
the
wouldn't.
situation, because you don't want to take a strong cleansing herb either that's going to clear the antibiotic out of you, because then the natural antibiotic is going to want to cleanse the other antibiotic out, so neither one's working for where they're supposed to be.
And that's stuff that we just
And
don't
I
know.
mean,
Yeah.
some may argue with me this, but this is what I have found. It's simple is better. If you're on blood thinners, there are a lot of herbs that thin your blood, so you have to be careful with
Not to overdo it.
not to overdo it and to be aware and be monitored with your doctor. But in general, there are a lot of food herbs that are very good, rich in natural minerals and vitamins that may not have the high doses we see on those vitamin pills. And you read the articles, internet, take this, we're the only people that do that. Well, you take raspberry leaf and it has the natural ratio of calcium and magnesium. Where do you think we got the idea of those ratios we should be taking them? Nature, we've evolved with these
Huh.
plants.
Okay.
And then our body, evolution, and what's the right word? Our bodies,
Adapts.
we
Or
know each other. So it gets assimilated easier into us than a big pill. Big vitamins are very important in certain therapies. I'm not putting them all down, but I believe starting simple first. Let's see how this works. A lot of women who are pregnant and they get low iron and they start taking nettles, their iron counts go up. So if you get put on some iron pill, you get constipated, blah, 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 blah. And here, diuretic, dandelion, one of the best diuretics in the world. And a lot of pharmaceutical diuretics leach your potassium. So you have to do this and then take potassium. Well, what's high in potassium? Dandelion leaf. All right.
Okay. I was going to say bananas, but okay.
And bananas. But what I'm saying is.
But you're talking about plants, yes.
Well,
not
there's, and I just feel in this day and age, with everything going on, just if I can get someone to look at the light and in the autumn leaves and realize there is light this time of year.
So it's like where your focus is.
Yeah.
Your wish is that people just stop and look at the wonders around them.
And that's hard in our everyday life. So that's when I'm working with
What
someone.
if you had a picture of a leaf on your iPhone?
Yeah.
I'm being a smart
Yeah,
ass.
that helps, I'm always.
No,
Yeah.
it's not the same. No, it's not the same. I don't recommend looking at a picture of a leaf on a device instead of looking at a real life
Exactly.
leaf. Yeah. I really was just
I
joking.
know.
Yeah.
But I do always make sure I have the cover of my phone, like that it opens up to something that makes
reminds you of, I think that's a great thing to do.
The one thing I always tell my apprentices and when I give talks, a great lesson I was taught in a wilderness lit class in high school was an English class, and we were reading a lot of nature books, and we were reading Pilgrim of Tinker Creek by I'm going blank. Oh,
What a bad librarian you are.
oh, I know. I think because I'm on.
There's no pressure.
I'm in an interview.
Because you have a microphone in your face.
Yeah. But anyway, she was like a modern Walden and was out at this in Virginia somewhere on a creek in a cabin and just writing and observing. And so we were told to take a notebook and for that semester and go out and find a place and just sit and observe it and at least stay there a half an hour. Back then we didn't have phones, so I tell people don't bring your phone, don't bring your iPad, leave that all at home or in the car. And then you just write notes and observe that area that you're sitting in, whether you were attracted by the tree, by a plant, by a rock. And you just write, even if you hear an airplane going by, and just write and observe it for a whole year through the season and notice the changes. And it really tunes you in to observe. Like indigenous people who were here, people ask me, how did they know these medicines? Because they were so in tune to their environment, they could have communication with animals, rock, sun, tree, moss. I can't explain it until you start tuning in. And then, so I have them, when they're studying the herbs, I have them look at the plants, pick a plant that attracts them and sit by that plant.
And you're talking about your apprentices?
Yeah, watch it through the year and really get to know it. Not just get to know it in a book, get to know it where it grows, what it looks like in the winter, what grows around it, what's the soil like, and what animals are visiting it. It's a great thing it helps you tune out the world. It's another form of meditation, but it helps you tune in to really learning the plants.
That just seems like it would be a great practice to do regardless.
Regardless, because we do need to connect to This is our spaceship. This is our Gaia, our Mother Earth. And it's very important for us to respect her, to thank her, and her gifts. We're not meant to be separated. And if we are, we're destroying it. What is our spaceship? This is not a political or a this is very important to I don't care who you vote for. Because it doesn't matter who you vote for if our planet is sick and our
Yes.
waters are sick.
Yes. Yeah.
So in the long and short, how did I get there from here? It was my way to help teach people about the earth and the importance of the health of it.
That's beautiful. And you don't seem passionate at all. Well, today and other times I've talked to you, when you start talking about the plants and the earth, there's this magical quality to the way you frame all of these things. It just pulls you right in. It's very cool. To me, it highlights the absence of it, that I'm not having the kind of conversation I'm having with you with anyone else, really. It feels like a unique conversation. And don't you think that's sad? That we
I
should all
do.
be
Well,
excited and
I
passionate
know
about
the internet is important and has connected people, but
it has a role.
it has a role, but there's a story in between. Yeah, you can make a bath salt and you can learn about things on the internet. Um, but there's something when you're working with the plants, and I remember I would bring in other herbalists to my center on the vineyard. I remember I was bringing Jeannie Rose, who she's from San Francisco, and she was my essential aromatherapy mentor, and she came and she taught me how to distill aromatherapy waters, hydrosols, and it was through her that I got my big 50 liter still that's originally from Turkey, had to come through Canada. Now this is before the internet was big, so now people get these things much easier than back then, but I had to have someone who was a teacher because still they think I'm making
Moonshine.
moonshine. And this friend of mine who's a great herbalist herself, Irene Fox, started Island Herbals and then sold it. Now she's back on the island doing the vineyard, doing she has another name because she had sold her business. And she kind of went, why would I go? I've read her books. And I just kind of said, and Irene has been in, let me give her credit, was in the health store business for years and years and years and had been around working with plants and stuff. So, and was a landscaper. So in her case, yeah, I get it. She'd already done a lot of that. But the point is, you hear the story between the pages. Like just to listen to someone like that talk and their wealth of information and getting to know the character, all the different people I've seen and talked to and the books I touch and gotten because I went and saw them at an herb conference, and that's how I chose the products for my store. I didn't go to health food store conventions, natural product conventions. I went to herbal conferences, and then I'd hear that person speak, and then that's how then I'd carry their products
So
if they
again,
sold them.
it's about this relationship.
Yeah, it's all about relationship. We need to have relationship with each other. Look who's everyone on the going down the sidewalk looking at their phones. I remember when not iPad, where were the first things? Walkmans.
Oh
I
yeah,
remember like people walking down. Even then, I wouldn't own a Walkman because you can't. It's important to
you could
make
get hit by a car.
communication because that's the thing about the internet. We think we're communicating, but there's something about the being with each other in our community. And I get concerned. There are some wonderful websites, the American Botanical Council, and they have good information. There are a lot of good information, but there's something about working with people and learning from your neighbor because yeah, we know nettles are rich in iron and minerals and anti-allergenic and whatnot, but well, I don't touch it because you might get a bad rash, but just being around it and learning, and someone all herbalists will have a similar apothecary, but we each have our own thing we're attracted to and how we help people. It's not the exact formula. So anyone on the internet that's saying this is the protocol for Lyme, we are the only people healing this, and then they charge you so much money. That's not true. To me, that's not real herbalism. That's not truly helping.
I think that's a really important message to get out there. And I was just thinking when I had some adrenal stuff going on, I went and sat down with you. And the experience it's like stepping into Heidi's fairy world. It's this really sweet experience where you sit down and you make tea
I
and
hope
you
you were in your fairy world too.
I always am. But you create this environment that's so it's like everything else goes away and it's this very nurturing, caring experience. I feel like you deeply listen to the person, what's going on as we're sipping tea in your lovely little tea house in the woods, which that alone is magical. And then you have like this tiny space that's crammed with information and herbs and bottles and jars and all kinds of stuff, and it's just like it's like going back in time. It's a really cool experience. It's probably a lost art, like what you're talking about with the internet. We'll play Google Doctor and look for the first supplement that shows up on the Google search engine, and then look at their claims, like you're saying, that this is the only blah 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 that will resolve your blah blah blah, and then that's it. There's no relationship there. It's just kind of like it's good salesmanship. They're selling you something, but if you don't have that background knowledge or a relationship yourself with your body or with the plants around you, then anybody telling you anything could sound good, whether it's on the internet or whatever. You'll just take their word for it and do it. This experience with you and people who work like you, I wonder, do you think it's a dying art?
Not in Vermont.
No?
I mean, you have a school right here
Mm-hmm.
that's bringing out some great people. I forget what's the integrative.
Vermont Center for Integrative Herbalism?
Yeah, I mean, it's beautiful. I mean, Vermont's filled with herbalists and
Mm-hmm.
wonderful people doing this. I was a little intimidated when I moved to Vermont because,
Yeah.
so I've kept very well, I was just trying to build my cabin and trying to establish myself and bringing my divisions from my plant nursery up here and just sort of trying to figure out how it works because I started working for Mad River Massage and trying to have that we would try to have classes or whatnot, and I realized I'm in a ski town,
Right.
faced in, so I had again, as I said, all the products that eventually became popular started with a client. So Dr. Nipbaum is where I got hold in the valley at Mad River Massage. They still carry it to this day, and it's my arnica comfrey blend, anti-inflammatory with essential oils that bring fresh blood and clean out the inflammation. Also, nip bone comfrey. It helps. Research has known to help stimulate stem cells for bone, flesh, cartilage, muscle. So it's a sports town, so it became popular there at Mad River Massage, and because I teach skiing at Mad River, I donate a bottle to the patrol, and so people could come and get a little, paper of that out of the big jar for
What do you
themselves.
mean a paper of that?
Like, pastry paper, I cut up little pieces so you can put your finger in, so you don't have all these different fingers in the
Oh,
cream
I
and,
gotcha.
spoiling it. And it's a shea butter
Charcuteries on
base,
it. Yeah.
so shea butter's anti-inflammatory in itself, and it just feels nice. So that now is sold at Mad River Glen at the ski area's general store, And that was my in because on the vineyard, a lot of people liked education and people come there for classes and writing and whatnot. So I had a lot of classes and brought in people from around the country to teach classes. But here, people come here and they're going on a bike ride, they're going skiing, they're hiking the long trail. Wonderful. That's why I come up here
Right.
to do that. So I've had to create a different thing. And then through word of mouth, people have come to my studio, and that's how I do it. I don't have a website. I do have a Vineyard Sound Herbs fan page on Facebook. I don't know how to manage it, but you can look up some of the things or pictures of workshops I've done, and you can get my contact information there, and then email me, and I'll send you information on what I have to offer.
So, how do you work with people? Do you work with people obviously in person? Do you do any kind of long distance work? Because a podcast reaches beyond Vermont.
Yeah, yeah. So I work either by phone or email.
Can't have tea that
You
way,
can't
though.
have tea that way.
Yeah.
Real serious. I can do like assistant tea, but if I don't know the person and I will work with anyone, but I'm very honest if they have a very serious medical situation and they're a complication and they're on medication, and I try to help them find someone in their area that does what I do so they can be working with that individual and their doctor.
Yeah, there's a lot to monitor, I would
Yeah.
imagine.
So,
Yeah.
but people, I did a garden club talk on the vineyard. That was my first talk 30 years ago, and it was fun to be invited back. I got hired at my father's funeral. Speaking of and my dad was a business consultant for kids. He worked at Babson, so I thought, Dad, I got hired at your funeral. And
Oh,
through some of those clients would come back to my mom's house. I set up shop, a little mini shop for the week that they could come after. And I sold this one woman bought Nip Balm, my Dr. Nip Balm, and my friend Joan helped me name it because she's a knitter.
oh,
Dr. Knit, what should I call this? Dr. Nip Balm, knitting so BALM, knitting the bone is for bones, arthritis, ligaments, and muscle. Balm.
and
So,
it's a
so
balm.
she always gets for her birthday a free bottle for life. So this woman's husband had Parkinson's and having hard time sleeping and whatnot, and she rubs that on his feet and legs every night, and she's like, now I have like four other people through her who are ordering this through me. So that's how I work the old fashioned internet word of
Word of
mouth
mouth. Yeah.
connection.
Hmm.
Yeah, but definitely always open to conversation. And
Do you have a specialty? I know you know a lot about Lyme.
I wouldn't say I've worked with Lyme for many, many years. I grew up in an area where it was very prevalent, went through college not knowing I had babesia, which is related to malaria, a co-infection of Lyme that, is getting these intermittent fevers. The infirmary said I had rheumatic fever. Maybe I freaked and I went to the health food store and I just then when I studied herbalism, so after college, I just started treating myself constitutionally, and I learned at herb symposiums about Lyme, and they were you have to hit it, you know, the spirochete gets used to something, so you have rotating protocols depending on the person, very individualistic, and so there are great books on it. Stephen Bruner did amazing compilation of information. But I told him once at a conference, I said, I used to help people with all these other herbs, and now everybody says, if it's not the Bruner's protocol. And he kind of laughed. He didn't mean it to be that way. He was just trying to get all this information out there for
Hmm.
people. So people take things so literally, like that's the only way. And there are lots of plants out there. And motherwort was the plant that got me out of it.
Wow.
So
But that may not be true for someone else.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's frustrating, the whole internet and what's in and what everybody says is the way. And instead of when I first opened the store, people were using all these classic herbs and then they were letting us help them, and all these plants have been forgotten because of someone wrote an article. It's same
So
thing
it
happens in
becomes
gardening magazines. You all have to have this plant in
the
your room.
trend.
It's the trend.
Sounds like you just meet the person where they're at.
That's sort of my thing, is trying to connect them in their life, how to get them connected with plants that are going to help them, whether it's a scented geranium plant, a rose scented geranium plant on their windowsill, and they touch and smell it. I did that for my mom. She calls it the antidepressant plant.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I mean, just doing simple things and finding what's going to help that person. I had a psychologist once. I was going through a hard time. I was building my house. I had, bad relationship, and it was just a mess at that time. And somebody recommended me to see this person. I won't say their name. They said, "Well, what makes you feel good?" I said, "Well, it really helps when I'm in a sad way to pull out my big coffee table book of lavender, Provence, and look through the pages." My dad was in fine paper and publishing. We grew up with Sierra Club books on the table and these beautiful Elliot Porter photographs with poems and all these things, Ansel Adams, and that helps me. And he says, "That's not very realistic."
Really?
Yeah. And I was like, I never went back. I walked out because that was feeding my soul. When you feed your soul and find out who you are, it helps you be strong in your daily
Well,
life.
that's a fucked up response for a psychologist to have when they ask you a question and they don't like your answer.
Hmm.
that that's yeah.
I
I won't get off
really
on that.
try to help people find what's in front of them that makes them feel better. Because as we know, laughing, smiling, dancing, endorphins flow. And anything that gets us, this world turmoil out there in the whole world and disharmony, it doesn't help us to be so sad at home. And it's hard not to be, it's okay. But things that where we can find the light in the leaves. And it was so great that I had my friend who's a tiler, Fred Gillen, doing our bathroom where our rot, we never treated the wood. And so I had a bad day, and he says, "I think you need to go find." I went for a run this morning, and the light in the leaves was amazing. And I always write that. I write little things on my invoices for people. Look for the light in the leaves, or look, all of that. So he just took
Reminders.
it. He gave me my own medicine.
Ah, I love it.
And so I took off and went for a hike and look at the leaves. So those are very important things to remember so we can be there for each other and ourselves and our work.
Nature is the best medicine,
Yeah.
really. I always tell people when I teach stress management workshops, if you can go hang out by a tree or sit on a rock by some water, just for 5 minutes, you will not feel the same when you leave that
Yeah.
tree or that rock as you did when you got there. I mean, it's just, you can. And everybody always nods when I say that, like, yeah, that's right. But people don't think to do that. They don't think to, I'm just going to go sit outside for a little bit, just to hang out. And I guess if you live in a metropolitan area, that's not always the easiest thing, but I imagine there are ways you can look at a weed growing through the sidewalk.
I have so many pictures of mullein and burdock and dandelion cracking through the sidewalks. And what do those plants do? The burdock, the dandelion, they help clean out disturbances in our body. And look what they're doing.
Breaking through the
breaking through.
disturbances of the human race.
I mean, I'll never forget when I went to see Susan Weed for the first time with my friend Tara, and we went and camped, and her saying, eat a little bit of a weed every day, like a natural plant, is very important for our bodies. And nibble on the pine needle for vitamin C. And I already knew dandelions were good for us, but I came back from that weekend and I was parking my truck in the back of the store, and my landlord, who was above me, was a pharmacy. He was the pharmacist in town. Isn't that crazy?
That is.
And I was down in this basement, and his wife liked to garden, and she was digging up all the dandelions, and I felt attacked after going to that weekend workshop with Susan Weed. This is in like 1990, I just was like, no, no. And then I would bring potted plants on our porch. We sold all the organic herbs potted, but I'd bring weeds, and I had big signs with what they do for you. So my friend who had menagerie next to me on the porch, who's originally from Newport, Vermont, she sold antiques and made clothes out of drapes and things. And she loved it. She ended up taking over my part of the store because all the mullein and everything had gone in all the stone, and there'd be this like crazy mullein garden all around.
It just grew there.
Yeah, it just naturally grew in all the cracks. And after I left, it was like
So you left
the
your
herb.
mark.
You left a mark. Yeah, they probably all poisoned it now. I don't know who's in there now, but yeah.
As you're talking, I'm just thinking about how, I mean, it is really sad that the general population doesn't have this knowledge anymore about simple things like chewing on a pine needle to get vitamin C.
Yesterday, I woke up. I had boiled some eggs, and over the weekend, I went, oh, I forgot about that. I'll have that for breakfast. I put a little kelp powder on there, which I love kelp on eggs. And when I was in school in England, it's real expensive in London. Like I stayed, in a guest house and would take classes and go to work in the clinic. And, I got cup of soups and stuff. But I had my bag of Ryan Drum kelp, who's from Waldron Island. Now I buy the Maine Coast kelp, but I buy it bulk, and then in my bread cook stove oven, I crisp it up and then bottle it and then grind it in my grinder. And that has so many nutrients, potassium, so good for you. Optimum nutrition when you can't get it elsewhere. So I'd always sprinkle it in the cup of soup I get or on my eggs because they would serve you in the morning eggs, but I just love that. I crave it, that taste. And then I went out to my greenhouse, which is attached, my all-season greenhouse attached to my house. It's a cold greenhouse. I don't heat it high in the winter. I just prevent it from freezing so the rosemaries stay healthy and the lemon verbenas and etc. Scented geraniums. So I let chickweed, which is a weed in very rich garden soils, that tastes like raw peas, and I love raw peas. My mom taught us to love raw peas and vegetables. And I let it self-sow, and I just snip that, and I put that on there, and I had some dandelion I let volunteer in a potted plant, snip that, and I still have nasturtiums growing in the greenhouse, and there you go. So simple. I didn't have to pay for that. I love that. My husband always says, like, when we've had people over in the summer and people are outside and the guys go out because we're in the middle of the woods, go pee. He goes, be careful where you pee. It might be in dinner. Sorry. That's rusty.
Huh.
You can edit that out.
No, that adds some character to the conversation. Once again, you took me down kind of the Heidi rabbit hole of nature, and it's been wonderful. Of course, I feel bad about myself for not knowing more about the plants in my yard, but
Oh, no, no, no.
oh no, I'm gonna feel bad.
Don't feel bad because you just look at one that attracts you and get to know it. It's just like going to a party and you walk in a big room of a lot of people you don't know. If you try to get to know everyone, you're not going to get to know anyone that night. So there's a natural affinity that happens where someone you just end up bumping into or you start a conversation with. So you get to know them. And then one of their friends comes over and they introduce you. So it's just like that, getting to know your plants. If you try to get them to know them all right away, you're not going to truly know the plant or the people. So these plants have relationships with other plants. And so as you work with, let's say you're attracted to dandelion in your yard or burdock, I'm just saying, or yellow dock, and even if you're attracted to a grass, just look who grows near the grass. Maybe that grass is growing near an herb. Just getting to know that plant and understanding why that plant is here may not be a medicinal plant, but it may have been a plant that has a history of use and why it's here. Because most of what's growing in our pastures, or we have a lot of introduced species from Europe, I mean, from overseas, because with people came other plants. And with, either through their animals they brought, through the feed and them pooping, or just people brought it because they knew they were good plants to grow for food and eating.
I'm just trying to. How did you get down that?
I don't know. I was just helping you find the plants, and I don't like guilt. I was born guilty,
Oh no.
But
Oh no. This is.
I hope it inspires you rather than makes you feel bad you don't know your plants out your back
No, it
door.
definitely does. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's never too late, right?
Never too late.
It's never too
Never,
late.
never too late.
No.
And you can live and know about a handful of herbs, like just even 3 or 4 herbs, could do everything for you. Everybody thinks you have to take this and you have to take that, and you don't. It's simplify.
Yeah, you make it sound so
It's
simple.
simplify. It doesn't have to be that complicated. It doesn't have to be that intimidating. And this is how my employees would work. Joan, my friend Joan Shea, who lives on the vineyard, who's an incredible herbalist herself, who when she would work with me, my dad came in to check out the store. And he said, "Okay, I'm Heidi's father, and I want to know what would help me with this." I wasn't there, but Joan's from Boston, and she's like, well, she's Joan. She's like, well, you could take that. He goes, well, then I want it all. And she goes, no, I don't think you should take it all. Keep it simple, see which one works, and see how your body reacts. And my dad said, because he was a business professor, he's like, my daughter needs to make money in here, Joan. You're supposed to have me buy it all. She goes, Mr. Schmidt, that's not our goal here. Our goal is to help you find what works best for you
You
and not
trained her well.
overspend. Yeah. That's why I'm not a millionaire. That's why I'm still, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on and for sharing all of your wisdom. It's actually breathtaking, the depth of knowledge you have. And I think that's really amazing. I think it's wonderful.
Well, I have to say, it's my open channels to the plants that it's not me. It's my open
Yeah, of
channels, and
course,
they
you don't
come
want to take credit.
channel through
That's
it.
that's good. But I mean, you're doing your part.
Yeah.
So there's that. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, you're saying your Facebook fan page is the
Vineyard Sound
easy.
Herbs has my phone number and email,
Okay, so
and
emailing or phoning you, those are the best two ways to get a
those are
hold
the
of you.
best two
And you
ways.
do not have a website.
I do not have a website, don't have time. I'm so busy harvesting, growing, formulating, living life that if I'm not a computer person. You know, I love my computer for making my labels, word processing, writing, but
But not for
I can't
business
spend
stuff.
my
Yeah.
I'm working with it's a constant information and feeling and thinking that the last thing I need to do is overuse my brain on the computer at night. I need to just chill and go for a hike with my
Okay.
dog or be
So
with,
email or phone Heidi
yeah.
if you want to chat with
Sorry, I
her.
get so complicated. I go on and on.
No, it's actually the opposite. It's not complicated.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Wendy. Always love being with you.
If you'd like to tap into some of that magical Heidi wisdom for yourself, which I highly recommend, you can reach her on her Facebook page, Vineyard Sound Herbs, or you can send her an email using the address I've included in the show notes. As always, thanks for tuning in. Until next time.